I would give Thornton a shot to be that wide receiver 3, maybe even ahead of Juju. Do you have a guy that you trust to run a 12-yard comeback route and win? That's one area where Hollywood Brown could be hugely valuable. It's a combination of Juju Smith-Schuster and Xavier Worthy replacing some of the things Rashee Rice does. There's a very, very high chance he's going to come back and put up wide receiver 1 numbers immediately. This might be the best run blocking group of the Patrick Mahomes era. The offense is going to look pretty different with Simmons at left tackle. So I think they've got an opportunity to surprise teams. They almost always win their season opener.
So the Chiefs might be without their wide receiver 1 in Rashee Rice, but the offense will still be very dangerous. And in today's video, the conversation I have with Seth Kaiser of KCSN should have most of you pretty dang encouraged about the state of the team heading into week 1. Honestly, I'm not sure if we're ready for what could be this season, so let's talk about it. But first, how about those? All right, Seth, 1 week away. Chiefs, Chargers, Sao Paulo, Brazil. We're getting very close. We've been excited about the Chiefs all offseason long. The offense looking great. And then we found out Rice is suspended the first 6 weeks of the season. How are you feeling about the Chiefs, the offense, kind of heading into the season as it's just a week away now?
You know, for me, I'm kind of relieved that the Rice suspension got resolved. For one thing, it could at least maybe sort of help put to bed for all but the most idiotic of people out there, the conspiracy theory type stuff, you know,
right.
all that stuff that really was encouraged by people who know better in the space and are just looking for conversation and ad revenue and stuff. It's an embarrassment to our profession, but that's neither here nor there. I'm glad that it's done in that they know what they're facing now. There's no question about, okay, will it be 4 games? Will it be 6 games? Will it be 12 games? Like, who knows what the NFL might do, especially the harder you fight. The NFL can be a little punitive that way. I also, as much as it's a bummer at the beginning of the season, I prefer that to a midseason suspension for a couple of reasons. The first one being, it gives Rice a little more time to come back from a knee injury. He looked perfectly healthy in camp, looked perfectly healthy in preseason, looks just as explosive as ever, honestly looks, I think, better than ever. And his routes look a little more precise. I mean, it's really fun to watch. And I know Mahomes has talked about that. But a little more time is always good to fully recover from something like that. The other thing is the Chiefs don't have to reinvent the wheel on offense twice. You know, they would, you start with Rice and then you don't have Rice and then he's back. And you kind of end up with these 2 major midseason shifts as opposed to 1 now. And now going in with an extra couple weeks to prepare for that 6-week time period. And it's a tough schedule, tough opponents. Their whole schedule's pretty rough until the very end there. And even then, depending on how good the divisional opponents are, it might be really tough still. So I'm glad it's done. It's a bummer because you can't replace a guy like Rice. I don't think people realize just how good he's been because of the timing of his injury and because of all the other stuff that was going on down the stretch in 2023. I'm really excited. I think there's a very, very high chance that he's going to come back and put up wide receiver 1 numbers immediately when he comes back, which this is just something that's worth noting. And I've talked to people about this. You can really divide Rashee Rice's career into 2 segments, weeks 1 through 11 of his rookie year in 2023, and then week 12 of 2023 thereafter. So through week 3 of 24, because he got injured so early in week 4. These are just his basic stats from that is 9.1 targets per game, 7.1 catches per game, 82.1 yards per game. So that is, those are wide receiver 1 numbers. You extrapolate that over a full season, you're talking about like a 1,400 yard season, multiple touchdowns. He has been producing at a wide receiver 1 pace. I know for a fact, not as a guess, as a fact, the Chiefs plan on him being the centerpiece of the passing attack in 2024. And it was pretty clear with what they were doing weeks 2, 3. That wasn't going to slow down. You would have had a few Kelsey games as teams started to adapt, but he was planned on being the centerpiece, the 150 target guy. And that was one way of easing the burden on Travis Kelce. It obviously didn't happen. I don't think people realize just how much he evolved as a player. And that makes it tough because it's not just flats and slants and bubbles or anything like that anymore. He's really worked on his releases at the line. He looks like a better route runner. He's able to win down the field a little bit more. There's so much he can do. And I think he's going to be able to hit the ground running and allow them to really figure out through 6 weeks, what can everyone else do? And you hate to use such a tough time in the schedule as experimentation, but I think that's a time for them to figure out, okay, what are some things we can lean on while he's gone? And then those will become really valuable change-ups that we have later on in the year.
So Brett Veach mentioned in his session with the media that Juju Smith-Schuster would be one that they kind of look to fill in a little bit of the role. He is healthier than he's ever been. He looks good, had a good camp. How do you like that or view that with Juju combined with, there's some what ifs there with Hollywood Brown. I think he's going to be ready with the foot, but he's been out for a while. And then Jalen Royals with a knee tendonitis. Those are two guys that you're like, hey, they're probably going to lean on them too with Rice out, but they're a little bit of a question mark now. So how do you like Juju kind of working in that role and maybe an increase of Xavier Worthy? Because I know you mentioned that in your article.
Sure.
All right, before we get to Seth's answer here, I do want to say if you are enjoying his content, this is where you're going to want to go to get even more. It's his Substack, the Chief in the North newsletter. He's dropping multiple articles every single week, and you can get a subscription to his Substack for 60% off, which is something insane, like $12 a year forever. Link to all that is in the description down below.
The big thing with Rice, because he can do a number of things, you really can't, you got to do the whole money ball, try to replace him in the aggregate, right? Where Juju can replace some of Rice's snaps are some of those slot, against zone, especially route combinations, running the pick plays well, doing some of those things that Rice does really well. Juju Smith-Schuster can do that stuff. Being a guy that Mahomes trusts to make contested catches. That's something Juju has been for years. It was an underrated part of how they won it all in 22. You lean on him too much, he wears down as the year goes by. I think he's only 28 still or 29. But he's just not as explosive as he used to be. And that lack of explosion does come through in other facets in terms of how do you replace Rashee Rice? Xavier Worthy's the obvious guy because he did it last year, replacing some of those bubble screens, some of those quick throws to the flat, some of those, hey, we're just snapping the ball and throwing it to you because we've got numbers to that side, and you are athletic enough to gain 7 easy yards instead of 3. Worthy, there was a real easy example of that in the final preseason game against Chicago. They motioned Worthy out of the backfield to the right side. They saw his guy following him. We're able to tell that that's probably man because his guy took a little too long to get out there. Used quick snap, throw the ball out there. You've got a numbers game. Even without terrific blocking, Rashee Rice had a really good block on that play, actually. But even without terrific blocking on the other guy and the Bears playing it well because Worthy accelerates so well, he gets out ahead, gains 9 easy yards. Worthy's the obvious guy to do that because he did it last year. It's not the best usage of Worthy. Worthy's at his best down the field and intermediate. Those are the routes he wins the best on, but he developed as a guy that you can do some of those easy button things with too. So I think it's a combination of Juju Smith-Schuster and Xavier Worthy replacing some of the things Rashee Rice does. And then they just need, I think, to adapt in more of a personnel basis, understanding that they're not sure what they're getting with Brown. They're not sure what they're getting with Royals. They might have to accept that really they start off the season with 2, maybe 3 receivers. Shout out to Tyquan Thornton for making the 53 and looking good all preseason that they trust. And so you almost have to shrink down your wide receiver personnel usage, which is something I definitely think they should do early in the season.
Yeah, on that note, before I talk about some of the depth piece wide receiver guys and how you could see them playing, you mentioned in your article with Robert Tonyan back on the 53 now, you could go more, and the Chiefs did this last year too. I think they really had to with all their injuries, but more 12, 13 personnel. So that's 2, 3 tight ends on the field. You even mentioned 22 personnel with 2 running backs, maybe Brashard Smith. But now you've got Kelsey, you've got Gray and Tonyan, who we'll see with the ones and all this, but he had a great preseason, a great camp, standout performer in my eyes outside of maybe Josh Simmons for the offense. How do you kind of see that playing out? It just with based on how you said it, they kind of might have to shrink down their wide receiver options, but is that, hey, we've got more tight end options, especially the underrated tight end 2 in Noah Gray?
Absolutely. And one great thing about Tonyan being your potential tight end 3 as opposed to Wiley, and I like Jared Wiley. I really liked his college film overall. You just never know how tight ends are going to adapt to the NFL. It often takes them a few years if you're not Brock Bowers. And so the thing about Tonyan is that he can line up in line or in the slot. Now, he's not this incredible slot receiver. He's not nearly as good as Gray or Kelsey, especially Kelsey, but you can line him up in either spot. He's competent in finding soft spots against zone. He's a veteran. He's been doing this a while. And you can also just have him in line, straight ahead run blocker. Noah Gray has less size than Tonyan, but he's showing he can line up in line. Travis, and obviously he can line up in the slot or the boundary. Travis Kelce can line up anywhere on the field. And in line, he's not a mauler, but he always seals off. He always does his job as he tries to maintain his, dude, I'm almost 36. Let's not get crazy here. I'm just going to kind of seal you off and let's not get too nuts, which is one way he's maintained his health. With that in mind, you can run 13 personnel with those guys and force defensive coordinators to make a choice. Tonyan's not a guy who's going to burn a lot of linebackers one-on-one, but you can't really call up a lot of man looks against 13 personnel against the Chiefs because there's not a lot of linebackers that can cover Kelce one-on-one without some help, or Noah Gray without some help. And so you have to ask yourself, well, are we going to play it heavy and we're only going to have 2 safeties and 2 corners on the field because they're running out 13? Well, then you're running the risk of a lot of open space if they decide to, spread it out, which they can with Gray and Kelce in particular. Well, okay, then we'll play it light. We'll bring on an extra safety, maybe even 2 extra safeties. And this is what I think differentiates the Chiefs this year versus even last year, the year before, and makes them closer to 2022. I think this might be the best run blocking group potentially the Chiefs have had of the Patrick Mahomes era. Kingsley Suamataia had a pretty tough preseason in pass blocking, and there's stuff that they're going to have to do to protect him, I think, all season until he shows himself to be a little less top heavy, as it were. Run blocking looked good, legitimately good. And as a people mover in that one area, that straight ahead gap running style where you're just, we're moving the man in front of you, he looks more comfortable doing that than Joe Thuney ever was. Now, to be clear, Joe Thuney, all-pro, incredible player, was able to do it, but wasn't a pile mover. Suamataia can do that. Josh Simmons can do that. So now, if you're in 13 personnel and they go light, it's easier when you've got a left side of the line that goes Simmons, Suamataia, Humphrey, and Smith to just say, okay, well, we're just gonna plow straight ahead and run right at you for 6 yards of carry until you stop it. And with Pacheco looking as explosive again as he did in 2023. And it's a more realistic goal to be able to run teams over. And so by having 13 personnel, you're leaning into some of the strengths that you currently have, not just in your tight end room, but on the offensive line. And that allows you, if you're in 12 personnel, you only need 2 receivers on the field. You're not going to that third receiver who maybe isn't as reliable if it's Tyquan Thornton, or as explosive if it's Juju Smith-Schuster. Or if you're in 13 personnel, you need 1 receiver. And I can't think of a better wide receiver for 13 personnel than Xavier Worthy, because he forces safety help over the top. And so you've got 2 guys taken out of the play there, and that makes the defense's choice in terms of what they're doing in the box even tougher. So there was one play in particular against Chicago. They lined up, I think it was in 13 personnel. And they had run already once out of 13 personnel in that drive. They do an under center play action and then have Travis Kelce at the intermediate level and then Xavier Worthy crossing the field behind him. Kind of a deep layers type concept. They hit Kelce for a pretty easy big gain. But those types of explosive plays were hard to come by last year. And by utilizing 13 and 12 personnel successfully with the run, that's one of the few situations where the adage that running to set up the pass really is true, in that you can force those linebackers to come up and creep up and let someone like Kelce take advantage of that. So that's a huge thing I would do if I were them, and it would allow them to hide some of their potential lack of depth in the wide receiver room.
On that note, Mahomes said after the Bears game that one thing they have to do well as an offense to help open up the middle of the field, sure, the deep ball, which 58-yard bomb to Tyquan Thornton was a lot of fun, but just the outside targets in general and finding success there. So he tried that early with Rice, drew a PI, deep downfield with Thornton, and then later again, Rice, touchdown. He did that with Jason Brownlee week 1 as well, and maybe that's where you see Brownlee and why he made the roster as an outside option. What are your thoughts on that? Because Mahomes basically said once you do that, the coverage will start to adjust, and that's when Mahomes then said Kelce was getting open in the middle of the field because of the adjustments the defense made.
Right. So people think of this stuff with regards to the Chiefs, in my opinion, in the year of our Lord 2025, a little incorrectly. A lot of people assume that the Chiefs faced just a whole ton of quarters last season, or a whole ton of 2 deep safety looks, because in 2020, 2021, And then in 2022, the revolution across the NFL, oh man, we got to do all these shells. It was largely because the Chiefs were just shredding people, and you had to have 2 deep safeties constantly. Teams played plenty of cover 3 and single high against the Chiefs last year. And, you know, the big thing, one way to think of it, I think that is helpful for, you know, your run-of-the-mill football fan like us. Don't think of it necessarily in terms of cover 2 or cover 3 because there's so many variants of that, and it all depends on what you're asking to do. Just think of it as middle field open or middle field closed. Middle field closed is 1 safety in the middle, right? The middle field is closed, right? Middle field open is 2 safeties, you know, here and here, where the middle field is open. And usually, like with variations of Tampa 2 and stuff, a linebacker will drop back to try to take the middle of the field. That's where you get seam routes. But I'm getting ahead of myself there. A lot of teams played a ton of middle field closed against the Chiefs last year, whether it was single high man, cover 3 variants. And the reason was they weren't afraid of boundary throws. Exactly what Mahomes is talking about there. And that's not just down the field stuff, although that's a huge part of it. It's back shoulder stuff. It's, you know, do you have a guy that you trust to run a 12-yard comeback route and win? That's one area where, by the way, I think Hollywood Brown could be hugely valuable because he won that way when healthy in Arizona and in Baltimore. That's where Rashee Rice, hopefully when he's back, can continue to win that way, the way he's shown. And then Tyquan Thornton is a guy that's shown he can win downfield in the boundary, which I want to see it in real games. But let me just tell you that one deep shot that they hit, that's not the only time he opened up deep. He got missed by Gardner Minshew deep down the right sideline in the first preseason game. He had a sweet double move. And more importantly, ran through contact, and Minshew just overthrew him. And what I mean by, you know, running through contact is he had the double move. The corner puts his arm out to try to slow him down as he accelerates, and he swatted aside and kept going. That was a huge problem for him in New England. He looks a little heavier and looks a little stronger, but he's still very explosive. And like, he ran like a 4.28 or something crazy like that. I would rather a guy with 10 extra pounds who's playing stronger, but now runs a 4.32 than a guy 10 lighter pounds, but struggles to break through contact running a 4.28. Because either one is really, really, really fast, and the ability to run through contact is huge. So those boundary throws, what they force teams to do, usually, if you just think of it in terms of the Thornton deep shot, Mahomes was able to ID that they're playing single high man coverage across the board. And honestly, Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy both cooked their guys there too, because that's what happens on long developing intermediate crossers when the protection holds up. And so he had a pocket, and so you allow guys time to run away. But what Mahomes was able to do is just look at that middle field closed safety, the single high guy, and sees that he's got a shade, Xavier Worthy, running across the field the other direction. And now he knows Thornton's all by himself. No one is there. It's just him. And the way that always works with middle field closed looks is if the safety is going to help cover a boundary route, he has to commit basically immediately at the snap because it's too far to cover, right? That's the thing with middle field open. Yes, you're leaving the middle of the field a little more vulnerable, but you're closer to the sideline. And, you know, there's 2 of you. It's just basic math. So much of football really is math playing out with gigantic dudes in pads. So if teams aren't afraid of being tested on the boundary, that middle field closed safety kind of stays put. And now what is the middle field? It's closed. There's nowhere to go there. But if you start making teams pay with that, and that's what they see on film, they've got to actually start to run some of that too high type stuff again, which in turn opens up the middle of the field for Kelsey. That's what made Kelsey's job. And he was a tick slower last year than he was in 2023 and 2022. We'll see. You know, a lot's been made about him dropping a few pounds, and we'll see. He looks great. But what would help him even more if teams get back to playing 2 deep safeties more often, because that he works that middle of the field better than anyone maybe in league history.
Well, and that's why with this Rice suspension, he's gone 6 weeks. They might lean on Kelsey a bit more than we think they will in his year 35 season, soon to be 36 in October. But then Rice will be there week 7 when Kelsey's probably like, dog, I might need a break for a second. So that's exciting. All right, once again, you see me wearing a Made Mob shirt in today's video. Basically, any shirt that I wear in my videos is from Made Mob. And if you go to mademob.com/HBTChiefs and use code HBTChiefs at checkout, you're going to get 20% off your entire order. Link to that is also in the description down below. Going back to Thornton and having a reliable deep pass catcher, that can provide that rapport with Mahomes. Obviously, some of that is just the O-line has to hold up. But what are your expectations of Thornton? I kind of view it as semi Justin Watson role, 200 to 400 yards maybe this year. Is that kind of where you're thinking with him as maybe your wide receiver 5 or 6 in the rotation at times, and maybe a little bit more used early because of unknown about Royal's knee, unknown about Hollywood's foot, and then Rice out of the picture?
I actually, depending on what happens with Brown, I could see, if it were me, I would give Thornton a shot to be that wide receiver 3, maybe even in certain formations ahead of Juju.
Okay.
Assuming Brown is healthy. Let's say Brown comes back, he's ready to go. Your obvious 1-2 are Worthy and Brown. And then they're going to have Juju out there a lot because he goes where he's expected to go. He knows how to do the second play type stuff. And so
block a lot too.
Yep, he blocks really well. Those things matter, and Mahomes trusts him. That matters a ton. The thing is, Juju's skill set is a little more redundant in a lot of ways with what Hollywood Brown and Xavier, where they do well as route runners, where they win on the field, certain aspects of that, other than obviously the downfield stuff that both of them can do. Tyquan Thornton doesn't really win in that same area, but he can be a boundary guy who has okay releases. They're not incredible, but he can get off the line, similar to Justin Watson. That's why Watson saw the field so much. You can line him up on the boundary, eat that contact, and get down the field. The difference between him and Watson is Watson, much like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, was more of a slow burner in terms of gearing up. Thornton has good acceleration. He's able to get downfield faster, maybe provide that feeling for the quarterback faster. And he also is quicker in breaks than either MVS or Watson was. He's not elite at it, but he is a guy that looks like he could run a 15-yard dig and get open. Neither of those guys could really do that. I personally, based on what I saw from Thornton, I would love to see him get a shot as wide receiver 4 while Rice is out and really be in there on a lot of some of these boundary snaps and stuff with kind of him and Juju switching in and out depending on role. You don't want to be too predictable with that, but there's stuff to be done there because I think the way he stretches the field vertically really changes the math for everyone, especially for Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown. I mean, Travis Kelce, it's a completely different thing if you've got one other guy that can start to draw the coverage. And again, it brings us back to maybe forcing 2 deep safeties if Thornton's on one boundary and Worthy's going downfield, even out of the slot. So with Thornton, my expectations are that he should be able to handle production-wise that Justin Watson type stuff. I'm not going to count on him for some of those same clutch catches. Watson really was very good at that. Once a game, just unguardable on the sideline.
3rd and 15.
Yeah. I actually have higher hopes, though, for a potentially higher snap in and snap out impact from Thornton if he does what he did in preseason. That's the huge caveat. If he does what he did in preseason, I think he could be more impactful snap in and snap out just by the gravity that his speed necessitates.
I love the idea, too, of just another reliable deep threat other than Worthy. Worthy's shown he can do it. So having Worthy and Thornton being able to do that, and then Hollywood, if he's healthy, being able to work in a little bit with his speed as well. Let's talk running backs for a second, because you mentioned, I mean, it's all complementary offense anyway. If you can attack downfield, you find success in the middle, but if you can also run a bit more effectively, you mentioned already with the O-line and Kingsley showing more promise in the run game, and Trey Smith, obviously, that's where he thrives as well, loves to just pile drive and pummel people in the run game. Brett Veach said earlier this week they're going to have 4 running backs on the roster, only dress 3. At least that's the plan. So I'm assuming that's Pop, Kareem Hunt, and either Elijah Mitchell or Brashard Smith. I would assume it's Brashard Smith right now, with Elijah Mitchell getting the Ronald Jones treatment for a bit here. Just valuable to have around in case of injury. But how do you kind of see the run game playing out? Or at least what are your hopeful expectations based on how the room is constructed, and especially with the intriguing idea of Brashard Smith, the converted receiver turned running back, and how they used him a little bit in preseason game 3.
I would really like for them to get Brashard Smith on the field on 1st and 2nd downs. I know everyone loves the idea of him as a 3rd down back. The problem is they're asked to be in pass pro there, and that's where Kareem Hunt should be in there. I personally think the way that this should work, if it were me, would be Pacheco's probably your primary back, but I would have him rotate with Brashard Smith on early downs, and Kareem Hunt is your short yardage and 3rd down back. Hunt doesn't have the explosion. Honestly, he's got great vision, and so that really helps him. And, if you're grinding teams down, then sure, yeah, you bring him in. We've run Pop 5 times this drive already. Let's bring in Hunt, let him run a little. That all makes sense. But his skill set, I think, is best utilized for short yardage stuff and third down stuff because he's a solid receiver, but he's good in pass protection, and Mahomes trusts him completely there. Pacheco looks as explosive as ever, and that's going to be crucial for him. I want to see Brashard Smith get some early down runs. Just because in college his vision was fine. He wasn't setting up blockers, but he was following what was there, and he's more explosive than Pacheco. I like Isaiah Pacheco a lot. He's contributed a ton to the dynasty. However, his vision isn't great. And so if the question about Brashard Smith is his vision, but he's the more explosive of the two, it might make sense to at least see what he can do there on those early downs. And additionally, we've already seen a couple times, he had the one drop where, he's honestly running essentially like a seam route out of the backfield. Kareem Hunt used to run those all the time. And the mistake he made there is he turned and started to kind of wait for the ball. Mahomes was expecting him to keep going. And honestly, he didn't need to keep sprinting because there's safeties back there, but you just keep moving as you look for the ball, and that becomes a significantly easier catch for him. Still should have hauled it in, but that's a little rookie moment. And then we saw later against the Bears, he ran a Texas route or an angle route, whatever you want to call it, out of the backfield against a linebacker. And in both of those routes, you saw how quickly he opens up against linebackers. And so that's really valuable on first and second down when teams aren't necessarily expecting it as much. And then it messes with their numbers in the box. So that's how I would do it personally. I don't think that's what Andy Reid will do. What I think Andy Reid will do is probably Pacheco will be more of the bell cow, and Hunt and him will share. Bell cow might be an exaggeration. I think Hunt's going to get a lot more carries on early downs than I would do personally. Hopefully, he's cut out candy or whatever it is he's done. Him and Travis Kelce can be on the same plan to, maybe be just a tick more explosive. But I think based on them giving Brashard Smith a few snaps with the ones, and it actually, yes, he had a drop, but overall, you could see that he belonged out there, and you can see the difference his explosion makes on an offense. Again, last year, the problem with the offense, it was very efficient. I think it was like top 7 in the league in efficiency, I want to say, in like EPA per play and DVOA. It's like top 7 or 8 in the league, but there's just no explosive plays. You and I talked about that, I think, earlier this summer. Yeah. The fact that they had a good offense with no explosive plays is incredible. Brashard Smith is one of those guys that can help you try to get to those explosives. So that's how I would do it if I were them. I think Andy will be mostly Pacheco and Hunt, with Smith maybe starting to see his role increasing as the year moves along.
He's going to be the guy that I'm most intrigued to see about, because creating those mismatches and his speed. So you're going to have 3-4 guys out there sometimes on the field that run a sub 4.40, and you're going to use Brashard Smith in the pass game. I want him to be used a lot. I have a feeling we're just going to see him sprinkled in, which is fine. He's a rookie in Andy Reid's offense, and that's kind of just how it goes. With all that being said, we've kind of dissected pieces of the offense there. What's your confidence level right now, given the state of the room and the roster, even without Rice for 6 weeks, during this 6-week stretch? The only positive I saw about the Rice thing, we talked about it a little bit, he can ramp up for the playoffs, and you don't have to have him, not have him, and then have him again. They also have 5 of their 6 AFC West matches with Rice, because most of them are in the back half of the season. But what's your confidence level about the Chiefs being able to absorb the loss of Rice and face kind of a gauntlet first 6 weeks?
It's definitely a gauntlet, and we'll see how good Jacksonville is. Everyone loves certain aspects of their talent. We'll see. But it really is, you're talking Chargers, Eagles, Giants, Ravens, Jags, Lions. If you were to pick any 6-game stretch, that would probably be the hardest one of them. I'm pretty confident in it just because the Chiefs generally start off well. They're working with guys that they're going to be doing kind of different things with the offense, I hope. But it's all stuff they were planning on doing last year that just kind of fell apart because of the way things went down. I think the offense is going to look pretty different with Simmons at left tackle. So I think they've got an opportunity to surprise teams. But if you can get out of there without your best receiver with above a 500 record, you've set yourself up really strongly for the rest of the season.
I will say the first 6 weeks, no Rice, really goes, you mentioned it at the beginning of this, it just really goes against the conspiracy theory that the NFL was trying to have the full squad available for the toughest stretch, and they were looking out for the Chiefs when really it was the NFL that proposed 10 to 12 game suspension for Rice. It doesn't really seem like they want to help, and that's fine. Rice did what he did. You got to pay the consequences for it, but it's just like, you're not going to have Rice for these first 6 games, so it kind of works against the theory of the NFL propping up the Chiefs because of whatever you want to say, the success, the money they bring in, Taylor Swift, all of it. It's not working. So they're going to have no Rice, but I'm still pretty confident that they'll be able to get the majority of these wins. I think an underrated game that I want to keep tabs on, I don't think they lose this game, but Giants, we kind of just overlook them, but what about Dexter Lawrence against Kingsley Suamataia? That kind of terrifies me. So that'll be an interesting game to watch, because if he's an absolute game wrecker, it's going to impact the offense's ability to kind of move.
Absolutely. And the Giants are actually set up, for as much as they have other problems throughout their roster, they are set up in the way that has given the Chiefs the most problems in the Patrick Mahomes era, in that they've got a bunch of just excellent pass rushers. If you can win with 4 against any high-level passing offense, that is the dream scenario.
Last thought is Brazil Chargers. Chiefs win that game. How are you feeling heading into this game, as everybody is now turning their attention to the start of the regular season?
I feel pretty good about it. I'm curious to see what the Chargers do without Slater. I think that really messes with kind of their plans this season, was to really increase the efficacy of their run game, which is always going to be the focus in a Jim Harbaugh offense. It'll be a tough game just because they're a well-coached team. Their defense gave the Chiefs problems last year, but they're not a team that maybe is equipped, if the Chiefs pass protection holds up decently, I don't know if they're equipped to run with the guys the Chiefs have vertically. They're really good at closing down the middle of the field and shallow stuff, which is why they were able to give them so many problems last year and the year before. If the Chiefs are able to get more vertical, that should help a ton. And them losing Slater, I think, is a big blow in terms of how they want to operate as a team. They're going to move, from what I've seen, Joe Alt over to left tackle, but now you're right back to a tough spot at right tackle, and the interior still is pretty suspect. Their hope is going to be, can we run the ball for 6 yards a pop, which, considering some of the drama and chaos surrounding the nose tackle position, maybe they can. Spags usually doesn't let a team do that for the whole game, so we'll kind of see how that goes, but I'm pretty confident the Chiefs take that one. They almost always win their season opener.
How about those Chiefs?